This is the all-new, highly anticipated Toyota Tacoma. I say highly anticipated because the last one was around for nearly 10 years and was highly regarded for its rugged simplicity. This truck takes a completely different high-tech approach. So will it still appeal to Tacoma owners of past? Well, that's what we're going to find out today by taking a detailed look outside, inside. We're going to throw a bike in the back as we always do. And last but not least, we're going to take it on the road to see what it's like to drive. What do you think about the looks of the new Tacoma? Leave a comment below. To me, this looks like a more modernized version of the last one. It's not a huge departure, but it still is a good looking, smaller truck. It has the muscular features in all the right places with the wider fenders and bulgier hood. They've certainly done a lot to modernize the lighting. If you look at the front headlights and the rear tail lights, they've done a lot here. You're seeing it here in Blue Crush Metallic, which is a dark blue with a slightly metallic undertone to it. It's a really good looking color, and also worth noting that this is the TRD off-road model. The TRD off-road, outside of the 17-inch wheels and the TRD off-road sticker, is really more about what's underneath. Toyota sells a ton of the TRD Sport and TRD Off-Road models. Well, this one is more tailored, of course, towards off-road, being it's in the name. You have Bilstein dampeners that are more tuned to off-road rather than on-road. You also get a rear locking differential with this TRD off-road model, and this one specifically is optioned with a front disconnecting sway bar, which makes it even more capable off-road. Certainly no one complained about reliability with the last generation V6 model. That thing was bulletproof, but what people did complain about was the lack of power and poor fuel economy. That's what Toyota set out to address here. And unfortunately, none of that stuff is free. There is some give and take here. So of course you have a lot more technology here to get better power and fuel economy numbers. With the base model SR, you can get a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. This, with most of the rest of the models, is a turbocharged hybrid 4-cylinder engine. So this is their I-Force model. It's a 2.4-liter engine. This one makes 278 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque. That torque is up quite a bit than the last generation model. This also gets nominally better fuel economy at 19 miles to the gallon city and 23 miles to the gallon highway. The biggest change with the new Tacoma, other than the new powertrain, is the interior. They've done an excellent job to bring this up to modern technology standards while also still maintaining the simplicity and ease of use of the previous models. Many people really liked how easy it was to get along with those old models, even though they did lack in technology, just because you could get in and go and everything was super intuitive. That's still present here. So while you do still get a new screen where it's got the latest and greatest Toyota infotainment, which is to say it's fantastic, easy to use, quick to respond, wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. You also get the beauty of the physical buttons. So HVAC, you have a knob here that you can turn. Your heated seats are operated and cooled seats with just a button. Even the drive select, drive, park, reverse, operated with this traditional shifter. It's just easy to get along with, and you know exactly how this works even before you get in it. It's also updated even more with a digital gauge cluster, so it's customizable and kind of has some different graphics compared to the last model. In terms of the quality and the materials in here, pretty decent, relatively solidly mounted, and I think these materials feel like they're going to hold up more than anything. You know, they're not the highest of quality, but you can tell that this is going to last, sort of like the last models did. The front seats are the soft text material, as they would say, which is really a synthetic leather. They're nice, and they have a pretty cool design in them, as well as being heated and cooled. As I mentioned, they are electronically adjustable and pretty comfortable for that matter. I think for me, the elephant in the room is actually the back seats, and this is something that not too many people talk about with the Tacoma. For as big as this vehicle is, and I understand that this segment of truck is a smaller segment of truck, there is a shockingly little amount of room in the rear seat. So for example, I am 6'1". I really can't sit behind myself back there with any level of comfort whatsoever. My knees hit the front seat. I have barely enough headroom, and really the angle of the back seat is maybe what's most uncomfortable. You're like super lurch forward. And I know, once again, this is a smaller truck segment, but as big as this vehicle is, it's kind of shocking how little space there is back there. For example, the Colorado that I was in not too long ago had more room. So it's something to keep in mind if you're just putting kids back there, or you're not even putting adults back there at all. It's not a big deal, but if you do regularly put people in the back, they're going to be miserable. Now, let's do our patented bike test and throw a bike in the back, but let's also see what kind of features they have in the bed. Before we get to the uneventful truck bike test, there are a couple things worth mentioning feature-wise in the bed of this Tacoma. First, the push button tailgate that also has a nudge feature which will lift back up if your hands are full. This trim model also gets an AC inverter in the bed so you can plug in your work tools or whatever else you need directly into the truck. And of course, your bike will still fit on the back tailgate. It's worth noting that with the Tacoma, you can still option a 5 or 6 foot bed depending on the trim, which is unlike the new Colorado or Canyon, which is short bed only. And as always, if you enjoy the bike test and the rest of the video, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. TRD off-road, we had to find at least some dirt and gravel, right? The biggest difference that I've noticed driving this compared to previous gen Tacoma models is really this powertrain. I mean, people asked for it, people wanted, maybe not necessarily this, they just wanted more power, more fuel economy, and that's what this is. This engine, paired with the electric motor, this hybridization, is just objectively better, basically in every way, than the last generation model, the V6, or even the 4-cylinder, if you want to talk about that one. It's really the torque. This thing has right around 50 pound-feet of torque more than the previous generation V6 model. And you know where you really feel that is up here. We're out near White River National Forest in beautiful Colorado, and the previous generation models, being that they were naturally aspirated, those motors without turbos, superchargers, or any forced induction, anything like that, they just don't make a lot of power once you get at about, we're just under 10,000 feet. That's the nice part about turbos, is they can compress that air, they're less affected by altitude like naturally aspirated engines. And then you know what else is even less affected than altitude? Electric motors. They don't care about altitude. They're not compressing air. So you have some really nice extra power. This bird really wants to die. He made it out, don't worry. And that's really the big thing here, is you have more power everywhere, especially if you're somebody who lives at elevation. Obviously, people are going to be buying this truck all over the place, and maybe that's not a big deal for you if you live even at sea level. But keep in mind, even at sea level, this thing is going to be more powerful, and it's going to move this truck and motivate it better than the last generation. Now, couple the engine with the transmission. You have a much more modern transmission. This is a very smooth shifting, and also, you know, it's really like kind of just falls into the background. It's made better, I think, smoothness wise with the electric motor, because, you know, they can kind of do some fill there with the electric motor. And outside of smooth shifts, quick shifts, what else do you want in a truck? The one thing I will say that I have noticed with this transmission is, as I've gotten it hot, I drove up from Denver, gained several thousand feet of altitude. I was also, you know, it's very warm here today. It's in the 80s. It was even warmer in Denver. This transmission gets very hot, and what I noticed is that if you are slowing down from, say, you know, 35 miles an hour down to 0, I did notice some downshifts that were a little bit harsher. And so that's something to keep in mind and monitor. Maybe that's fine, that's acceptable with this transmission, but a little bit jerky, and I was kind of surprised by that. So something to keep in mind. Now, the suspension, this is something that I think is important to get on this road. It's definitely come more alive on this sort of gravel road, and I was just on an off-road trail as well. You know, go figure, the car that's called the TRD off-road is better off-road. I think the main takeaway here is that you need to be honest with yourself on what you plan to do with this vehicle. Because when I was just driving this thing, and we're going to get on some regular pavement here pretty soon,
on regular pavement, this is not that great of a ride. It's very truckish. And you might say, well, it's a truck, duh, like it's gonna ride like a truck. But so many modern trucks ride excellent, and they ride kind of more like cars and SUVs. This feels just more like a traditional truck. It's kind of got that, you go over a bump and it's got that jiggle, body on frame jiggle that, I mean, so many trucks and body on frame SUVs do. So it's not that great on road. It's very firmly sprung, actually, I would say, compared to other trucks other modern small trucks that I've been in. So that's the part where I'm saying you need to be honest with yourself. It feels right at home here on a dirt road, on a gravel road, but once you start going into regular pavement where there's potholes and stuff like that, it's pretty jarring. So I think some other trucks have a better day-to-day suspension than this. Now, maybe buy the TRD Sport if you don't really plan to go off-road and you want a slightly better ride. Outside of that, I think the main advantage here is the usability of this vehicle. I've talked about it in the interior segment, but it's hard to understate. I really like this interior more than pretty much every other competitor in this space. It's just really easy to get along with. They're all matte materials in here, you know, and it's like Toyota really thought about that. It's like, okay, you have a truck, it's known for getting dirty and being in dusty roads and stuff like that. You don't want any high gloss materials in here. Something like the Colorado that I was in not too long ago had some piano black in there, and it's just like, why would you put piano black in a truck? It's just gonna get dirty and smudged up and scratched up. So this all matte materials, it feels really solid, really well made, feels like it's gonna hold up. And I think that's what people are gonna be most excited about with this truck, is it maintains the old ways, but it's all modernized with this new technology. I've really got along well with this screen. The Apple CarPlay works pretty well, and overall that interior usability, I think, is something that some people overlook because it's not sexy, right? Usability isn't sexy, but when you live with the car on a daily basis, it's extremely important. So that's where this thing really shines. And I think the last thing that we should really talk about is value. This is as spec'd a nearly $55,000 truck. We should also talk about reliability. We'll get to that after the value. But that seems like too much money to me. Of course, that's up to you. Value's kind of in your eyes ultimately. But really most of the $55,000, well, at least a good chunk of the $55,000 is from this $8,000 package that this car has. Look, obviously, if you can skip that, you're going to save about 20% on this truck, because it's the TRD off-road. This specific model starts around the low to mid 40s, but at nearly 55 grand for this thing, it starts to be a tough pill to swallow. And I think about the ZR2 that I was in last year. Excellent vehicle. I think I would take the ZR2 over this. They're both great vehicles, don't get me wrong, but the ZR2 is less money than this as spec'd. So that's pretty wild. You get DSSV dampers on that thing. You don't get the hybridization, but that's a pretty badass truck. So in my eyes, I think this is fantastic all around, but I would try and keep the options low. I mean, I tend to always say that on this channel, but especially on this one, just because it gets expensive quick. And you know, the SR model, the very base model, you can get the just regular turbocharged 4-cylinder without the hybridization if you are just one of those people that don't want hybridization. If you want to step up to a higher trim model and still get this hybridized motor, it's overall very, very good. It just, I would tend towards the cheaper models. Keep this around $40,000 and I think you'll be pretty happy. The last thing is, of course, reliability, and this is the hard part, right? We just don't know. It's a lot of speculation. People are like, oh, it's turbocharged, it's you know, got a battery, it's got electric motor, it's gonna brake. People point to the Tundra, and you know, fair enough. The latest Tundra has had its fair share of issues. Recent recall that they're gonna replace all 100,000 engines. Good luck with that. Now, what I will say is that that was more of a manufacturing defect than a sort of engineering or design defect. So that gives me a little more hope that these things will be reliable. And keep in mind, this is a completely different engine than that. And it is Toyota. They tend to do pretty good Q&A, but only time will tell. So I just don't want people to say, oh, you know, there's no chance this will be reliable. I think there's a pretty good chance because, in fairness, Toyota's been doing hybridized powertrains for a very long time. The turbo is kind of the unknown thing here. So take of that what you will. There is certainly more complication here, and that does tend to affect things long term. We'll just have to find out. I've really enjoyed my time with this truck. If you made it this far in the video, guys, I really appreciate it. I'm super looking forward to, I have the AT4X, the Canyon, the GMC version of the Colorado coming up soon, and also the Raptor Ranger. So that will be fun to do a comparison of kind of all these and see what the latest and greatest is, because the Tacoma was kind of the tried and true choice for a very long time, but there's some really stiff competition now. So unless you're a Toyota fanboy, you have some serious consideration in this category, which is great. Love small trucks, and the fact that we have some really good ones now is awesome. So like I said, if you made it this far in the video, guys, really appreciate it. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.